I recently read that life battles are not always won by the biggest or the fastest, but by the ones that are able to adapt. And it instantly gave me an idea for the garden. It has been unbelievably hot in my 9B zone. So hot, in fact, that no matter how often I watered, the heat just dried it up. It was even causing the sunflowers to quickly lose their petals. I had to become more creative and adapt to deal with the Florida sun, or the garden would burn up. I've seen other gardeners use shading, but didn't want to do a lot of heavy construction to set it up. And then I thought, why not use the mini greenhouses for shade covering? I knew they fit over the beds from using them during the winter. And now they could serve a different purpose during the summer. The first thing I needed to do was take the plastic off the frames. I took one and began that task under the canopy because the sun had already heated up. I started by removing the staples that held the plastic in place, but quickly saw how time-consuming that was and just began to rip the plastic off the frame. In no time, I had a bare frame. I had some cheap weed barrier that had been sitting in the garage for years that would work just fine. It would let in sunlight, but also shelter my plants from the aggressive heat of the sun. Once I laid it over the frame, it would cover almost the entire top. I simply needed to measure the length I needed and staple the covering to the top of the frame. Once the covering was attached, I began the process of seeing how well it would work once it was placed on the first bed. As soon as the frame was in place, I could see how much it shaded the bed. And then I wondered if it would be enough, and decided to do a double layer. Take a look at the difference in shading. Now that I know what the shading can do, it was time to start the second frame. This one was under the shade of a large tree, and from what I learned with the first frame, I just tore the plastic off. From there, it was a simple matter of setting the second frame over the kale and bell peppers that could really use the shading, and then stapling the double cover shading. When the second bed was covered, I took a step back to really eye the garden, and I liked what I saw. I plan to come back and decide where the third frame will go, because with the collards or the sunflowers, both sections would require extra work to complete the shading. Now at least my plants have a chance against the sun. My next plan against the heat was to try to slow down the evaporation of water from the soil. Remember those leaves I collected during the fall? In the past, I ground them up so that they would break down quickly and not blanket the ground in the beds. Now I wanted them to blanket, to hold in moisture. But because they would break down more slowly, I needed to add compost from my compost bucket to provide ready food for the worms in the beds. I added some to all the beds. That done, I braved the heat and gave every bed a deep leaf cover. Even the hanging planter beds, I put leaves everywhere, even on the blueberry and peach tree beds. Once every bed was covered, I went back and gave each bed a good watering so that the leaves could hold in the moisture. But what did I find as I was watering the flowers near the seating area? Another grasshopper. I knew they liked peas and bean leaves, but this one was actually eating the marigold leaves. He didn't make it, but I still have to be on the lookout for these guys, despite decreasing their numbers. Before going inside, I took one last look at the garden. I'll let you know how the shading works, but at least now I have hope for the rest of the gardening season. See you next time.